Okay, so it's 11:01, so we'll start this thing. I put a note to myself to do my spiel this time for anybody that's been watching these deals. So hello. As you may or may not know, if you're watching this, I'm known as Eli the Computer Guy. I do a project called SiliconDojo.com, where basically we're trying to make a high quality technology education as accessible as water. Like, what if you could just go and learn? So we have self-study programs on there. I do one-on-one coaching sessions every Monday between 1 to 5 p.m. We normally do I don't know, 4 to 6 of those per week. And then we also do group sessions. So this is basically what we're doing right now. This is a Zoom session. We have some people in the audience. And the idea is to bring real technology professionals in to talk about the real world of technology and basically what decisions they're actually making, right? Everybody can sit at a bar or have a cup of coffee and talk about what they would do. It's a whole different world when you have to throw $100,000 on the table. Yeah.
That's the truth.
So today we have Shane Parreco. Parreco, right?
Parreco like Jericho.
Parreco. There we go. I meant to ask that before I started. Oh well, we
That's
have
all right. No worries. No worries.
Shane on. So yeah, he is CEO and founder of Aktiga, OTC, AgendaKeeper, and I think the first thing we're going to do is figure out what the hell all that means. Is because when I first had you on, it was like, oh, you're the CEO of Actiga. Okay, let's talk about Actiga. And then I just saw you at 1 Million Cups here in Asheville, and then you got all this other stuff. And so, welcome to the show. And Shane, so you have 3 companies. What's going on with you?
That's a great question. Um, so to give you a little bit of background, I started online training concepts first back in 2018 to really focus on very similar to what you're trying to do with Silicon Dojo. So I love that you're trying to make technology education accessible and free for folks online. I think that's awesome. The business online training concepts, really got its legs under it in 2019. And then, of course, in 2020, the pandemic hit, and that really changed the focus of the business from, I had built an online learning platform for pilot education, ultralight aviation. I'm a pilot and an instructor and was looking to create some materials for my students. Um, and then all of a sudden the world went remote. And so people were asking, hey, you know how to do online learning and online training. Can you help us? And so I brought on my partner, Sarah, and she joined as co-founder. And we really shifted the focus from, being a platform and a product kind of business to a service agency, training and learning and online learning development. So that really kind of covers everything from strategy and understanding instructional design and graphic design, and then web development and leveraging a learning management system. Do you have one built for you, custom, or do you leverage a third party platform to host and manage and share and create access to your content? One of the things that we ran into after the first couple of years of working and trying to expand our client base, and the business has really grown into kind of this partnership model where we work with organizations in these long-term relationship like engagements where we try not to say, hey, let's just build your content and high five, we're done. It's more of an ongoing partnership. Let's build what you need to solve your like kind of current issues or current challenges with your training or onboarding or whatever that looks like, and then let's keep the relationship going because those needs are constantly changing and evolving. When businesses or nonprofits change their process, a lot of times that material doesn't flow backwards to the onboarding and the training material. So we try to create these relationships where we can help these organizations keep up with their materials, keep up with their training and onboarding materials. We ended up doing a lot of exploration into the VR training and like kind of immersive learning world, and found a client that was really excited about that. And so we went into a deep dive into a project for VR training and learned a lot about that world. I know, Eli, you know a lot about Unity versus Unreal, and like that whole side of game development and game engine development, and finding engineers that know how to use those tools is a little bit more challenging because most of those folks work for game development companies. And so we went probably 6-7 months into that process, and the client ended up frustrated with the process. At the end of the day, when you build VR, only people with VR headsets can access that content, and only people with VR headsets that can access that ecosystem that you publish into can access that content. So it was like smaller and smaller and smaller bits of the market. And they were like, well, this seems crazy. And we were like, well, yeah, it does. Sorry, you know. Um, and that kind of gave us this desire to explore more about alternatives to that model. And we found one of our first engineers that kind of helped me create Actiga was Keaton Bishop Marks, super talented engineer, really actually gifted designer and developer and a good friend. And he really kind of came up with this idea, and we molded it together of how do we leverage the web to make immersive content more accessible. And so he really authored this white paper that we published together called XRWD, and that's really taking the concept of responsive web design to the spatial device level. So what does extended like reality look like with responsive web design? How do we support 3D? How do we support, you know, immersive and spatial content on like a phone? Can you still interact with that content? And what we found is there's already some really cool tools out there, 3JS and React 3 Fiber and React XR. And so we went really deep into that world of building for the web and leveraging WebGL. And it was really exciting for the first year and a half. And as with all entrepreneurial journeys, there's kind of twists and turns and jogs and splits and pivots and those kinds of things. And you know, to answer your question, Actiga really started as an immersive web software development company. You know, we really wanted to focus on VR and XR, and you know, the forces at you know at work in the world, you know, kind of put me in a position where I had to make a difficult decision to say, hey, as exciting and cutting edge as this is, we need to find some other opportunity to get a product to the market more quickly, generate some revenue, and keep the business alive. You know, I started Actiga with my own money and haven't taken any outside capital or sold any equity in the business, and really wanted to try to keep the thing small and bootstrapped and really tightly focused. And that's really challenging. And also, like, being in Asheville, it's not exactly an investment hub, so there's not a lot of outside capital accessible. And so we saw this opportunity to build a product that we really actually wanted to use, and we saw and discovered a real pain point in the team and business management process, and that's really where the AgendaKeeper as a product came from. So if we think about kind of hierarchy and structure, Online Training Concepts was the first business. Actiga was kind of a spin out of technology focused business from Online Training Concepts, and we moved me and 3 of our developers over to Actiga to start. And then AgendaKeeper is really our first product that we've brought to the market. It's still pretty early. We launched into beta earlier this year, kind of end of January, early February. And we've been gradually adding, you know, users, and we actually have given people the option to opt in to pay as a subscriber. And a handful of folks have, which has been really great. To just have a little bit of recurring monthly revenue, not a whole lot. I don't think we're quite at 3 digits yet. So I think we're making like $60 monthly. So I mean, like, hey, you got to start somewhere, right? And so our vision for the AgendaKeeper product is to get other teams using it. You know, people, the product itself is meant to address the pain point of the agenda and managing notes and action items for recurring meetings. So internal team meetings, whether that's weekly stand-ups or client meetings that happen weekly or bi-weekly, board meetings that happen monthly. You know, we've got a few nonprofits that are trialing the product with us right now and giving us feedback. And that's always been part of the conversation, is managing the agenda and where are the notes and how those things typically don't always stay in an organized place together, associated. And who do we ask to take notes? Do we use an AI system? Who's keeping up with the action items? Is that coming from an AI system or not? Or do we have someone sitting there actually taking notes and creating these things to follow up with folks with like minutes after the meeting? We've been using it internally since late last year. really trying to stress test it. And I'm really excited about the product. I think it works great. I'm really excited about our roadmap, about getting like action items and integrating with other platforms like Zoom and others to try to get this to be a product that becomes a really easy add-on to the workflow, like for any team, whether that's a nonprofit business or a client agency or a consultancy, or if it's a larger organization or enterprise. So that's kind of the breakdown. There's other products that I'd love to try to bring to market, and I think trying to keep the business of Actiga alive as an organization individually, opening our doors as a service agency to say, hey, we're a software development company. We're opening our doors as like a dev shop, a custom software like development agency. Come to us. We can help you design and build your product and then help you market it as well. We've got a really great marketing director who just joined our team, and we're actually finding folks that already have something, but they're struggling with like SEO or marketing. And so they're coming to us just for that piece of the service. So trying to kind of build a bit of a wraparound service agency, so that we can grow the product itself and potentially help other entrepreneurs or people that have good ideas or engineers that have a really cool proof of concept that they want to try to add some capacity to, get some team members. One of the things that I run into a lot is with junior or new developers. It's one thing to learn how to write code and how to build a product, and that's just a learning curve unto itself. And there's a lot of learning that has to go into building and launching and deploying an application, as Eli, I know you're intimately aware of. But working on a team is like a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother learning curve, and how to deal with merge conflicts and rebasing code and having multiple developers working on the same code base at the same time, and dealing with issues that come up, both just from a technical perspective of when there's unexpected overlaps in code and one person's code breaks somebody else's feature, and then also like team communications and creating a good environment for giving feedback on someone's work and taking good feedback. And those are skills that are not always inherent, especially for more engineering minds. That's for sure. Communication isn't always an innate skill. So trying to figure out a way to support that. So that's really what we're trying to do with Actiga, is leverage the process and the culture that we've built to support other people building their products and bringing their ideas to life. And so far, I mean, even just from Wednesday's presentation, I've had 2 or 3 people reach out and say, hey, I've got an app idea and I would love to talk to you. So I feel like, my hope is that the word gets out and Actiga can become kind of the go-to solution in Asheville for people that are looking for that kind of support.
Oh. So is AgendaKeeper like its own LLC, or is it simply a product of Actiga?
Right now, it's simply just a product of our work. We kind of, I think in the footer, we say like built by or powered by Actiga, something like that.
Yeah.
We're exploring what is going to be the ideal kind of corporate business structure for that. I think spinning it out as an LLC wholly owned by Actiga is probably going to be the easiest first step for its iteration as a potential business, and having its own life cycle. Whether or not that means the product becomes a target for acquisition or what that looks like is definitely still feels like a long way off. But right now it's just a product of Actiga. And what we do from here, whether or not we create a separate business or spin it out as its own thing and put a team of people on it like directly, is kind of yet to be determined. At the end of the day, I'm really interested in this idea of like a software studio or a venture studio or some kind of blend of those two things, where Actiga is kind of the larger organization, and we've got teams of people that we can kind of deploy to help build products or to help, refactor existing legacy products, or whatever comes in the door. We can deal with what you have, whether that's an idea or something functional, and help you build it and grow it. I feel like there's a handful of folks that I've met in Asheville that are really interested and excited about that idea of some kind of hybrid or blend of the venture studio and the product studio or the development studio kind of model. Not exactly sure what that looks like yet, but right now we're at least finding some traction, and we've got a few clients, and feels like we've got a lot of interest in potential clients, and so I'm just trying to lean into that. At the end of the day, I want to keep the business alive and generate revenue and keep the team together, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to make that happen.
Okay. So online training concepts, that still exists as a company?
Yes, it's a separate business. Sarah Martin is the CEO. She's the co-founder, and she runs a dedicated team that's completely separate from Actiga. Ironically, we share an office at Hatch, so her team kind of has part of the space, and my team has part of the space, and there's a little conference room kind of space as well, and so we kind of share that when we're meeting with clients. But yeah, her team is instructional designer, a couple instructional designers, content producers, and web developers. And so it's really online training concepts focuses on that, like training strategy and consultation, whether that's from like a learning design, instructional design perspective, or a graphic design or a web development perspective. Some organizations come to us or come to OTC and they say, hey, we've got this huge body of learning content and we're trying to figure out how to create easier access. We're using a learning management software system. It's not working great. We're not getting the reports that we need, or we're not getting insights into the analytics the way that we need to report for the grant that pays for us to continue hosting and creating access to that content. We've got a couple clients that are in a similar kind of situation with that content, or they have a bunch of content and they want to license it to other nonprofits, and there's not a great learning management software that enables that, where they can have their own content, where with the end users like student learners that are accessing content, but then they want to say, yes, we want to put all this content in kind of another bucket and make it so that it's easy for this other organization to license and use and create access to that kind of in their own kind of multi-tenant environment. So we're actually working on a product with online training concepts to try to solve that problem as well. So there's a lot of collaboration and overlap between the businesses, but there's two separate teams for sure.
So is there a practical reason for that? Because one of the complaints I've heard in the startup world is, you hear about mission creep or feature creep. There can sometimes be LLC creep, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna create this LLC and this LLC, and you're like, dude, fuck, just shove it in one thing. Like, is there a practical reason why Actiga isn't simply like a department in OTC since you already had it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The easy answer to start with, when I started Actiga and Sarah and I decided to spin it out, to be more focused on product and software development, really specifically. Online Training Concepts is an LLC. It's a North Carolina LLC, and it's wholly owned by Sarah and I. And at the time, I was thinking there's always going to be a chance with a software product company or a software development company to take outside capital. And so when we started the business, it was like, should it be an LLC? And that's kind of those questions all came up. Like, do we just have another LLC? Is this just going to feel like it's blurring the lines, and why do we need it? And those kinds of questions definitely came up a lot when we were trying to figure out how to navigate this, and talked with some business mentors and some advisors and folks that I had been working with. I've been through a handful of kind of incubator cohort experiences over the past couple of years. And the feedback was, if you think you might want to either create an opportunity to sell equity in the business or to share equity in the business with like an employee stock option pool in the future, an LLC is not a great model for that. And so they were like, the best option is a Delaware corporation, a Delaware C corporation. And so, we kind of weighed the pros and cons for a while and hemmed and hawed for a bit. But ultimately it was like, okay, Online Training Concepts makes sense as an LLC. Let's keep it as that. And let's make Actiga a Delaware corporation and issue shares so that we can have the flexibility in the corporate structure to be able to share either shares of equity through a sale or shares of equity and shareholders internally with the team as our team grows. So that was the flexibility that we were kind of looking for. And that was the reason why we made the decision. Honestly, we've thought about the other way around, like, does Online Training Concepts need to be separate from Actiga? Should we potentially consider merging them at some point in the future? And that's like a, well, should we? I don't know. Maybe it's like one of those things where, I could have probably a dozen LLCs right now if I wanted to, because I've got a lot of other irons in the fire. But I'm trying really hard not to end up in that situation where the focus creeps and we feel like we're losing our focus and losing our target. At the end of the day, online training concepts has a really clear mission and a really clear focus, and I feel like Actiga now has a much more clear focus as a dev shop, really as like a custom development company in Asheville. There's not a lot of those. I think there's only one or two other custom dev shops in Asheville, and they're not very well known. And a lot of people say, "Is there a dev shop in Asheville?" We kind of need a go-to solution for that, and so I'm just trying to lean into that and say, "Hey, this is going to be our identity, and we hope to grow and expand from that." And AgendaKeeper is part of that growth plan of building a product that can really scale. But for now, there seems to be a very clear need for this kind of service. So we're just trying to lean into it. Like let's just stay focused. And that's part of the thing. It's like Sarah is the CEO of Online Training Concepts. I don't even really work there anymore. I just work as the CEO of Actiga. And sometimes a client comes in that needs some custom software development, so we just kind of become the dev team. If we need one or two or three developers, I can put them together on a team to support that client for Online Training Concepts as kind of like as a partnership, as a pass-through expense for OTC, because they don't have as much technical expertise there. It's more training development and content production and some lightweight web development. The more technical folks are definitely on our team at Actiga.
Interesting. And then with the C Corp, so you got a Delaware C Corp. Now, as far as I've understood, talking to lawyers, that's net in 2020s is not as important as it was back in 2010. So basically, apparently, all the corporate laws have basically normalized, and they say just get a C corp wherever you're at. Was there a specific reason you went with the Delaware C in this time period, or was that kind of what you were told to go with, so you went with it?
Well, that's a great question. I asked the same question. I was like, why don't we just make a North Carolina corporation? What difference does it make? And I actually got the determining factor kind of answer, because I had also asked a bunch of folks. I asked some lawyers, I asked some other business advisors, and there was a lot of kind of almost like equal answers on both sides. Like, oh, Delaware, sure, yeah, that's the thing. Go with that. Oh, well, no, it doesn't really matter anymore. It's not as critical. Just make it wherever you are. Like could be Nevada, could be Texas, could be even North Carolina, whatever. And then I talked to an investor and I said, what matters to you? Like, would you invest in a North Carolina corporation, C corporation, or would a Texas C corporation, or a Nevada? And he said, well, this might be the easy answer. He said, this particular investor is based in Raleigh. He's a fund manager for a pretty decent sized firm. They're in their third fund. I think it was 50 million or something like that. They did 10 and then 20 and then 50. Fund 1, Fund 2, Fund 3 kind of thing. I think they're already raising their fourth fund. And he said, I don't think we've ever, out of all three of our funds, we have never invested in anything other than a Delaware corporation. And he was like, so if you want us to invest, you should probably create a Delaware corporation. And I was like, wow. And so since then, I've asked other like investment funds and firms, and they're like, oh yeah, if it's not a Delaware corporation, we just have them reincorporate in Delaware when we invest.
Really? Even now? Interesting.
Yeah, even now. And it's one of those things. It's like there's flexibility in terms of like headquarters, what's your localization for your business operations? But when it comes to corporate structure, Delaware still has the deepest corporate law. I mean, they're like corporate law precedent goes back to like the late 1600s. So, I mean, it's the deepest corporate law state in the country by a long way. And I definitely see the trend of like businesses wanting to move their headquarters, or, like Tesla moving from California to Texas, or, Oracle moving to Texas, and people like moving their headquarters around, and potentially creating subsidiary LLCs or subsidiary companies. And I think the vast majority of startups that get investment money still run through Delaware to this day for some reason.
Interesting. So to
Yeah.
swing back, so when you created Actiga, then you were trying to do this web project for your client. And so you're saying that they got frustrated. However that worked out, they got very frustrated. So for a lot of my viewers, again, if you're trying to spin up a new idea in a new realm where you don't necessarily know what wins and losses look like, when
Mm-hmm.
you look back at that project, and not to be hard on you, but like where was the fail point? So if they got frustrated because they didn't get a result, there was a failure there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So who failed, what failed, why did it fail?
That's a great question. They got frustrated because we had not yet learned a lot about building VR and XR content on the web at that time. We were just operating within the current, which is still now the current modality of using a game engine, building a native application, and publishing that somewhere or loading it directly onto a headset. That's still the common process. Like just like when I meet founders or engineers that work for a VR company, my first question is it Unity based or is it Unreal based? And 90% say it's Unity based. And so the failure there, from my perspective, is solely in the hands of the industry. Like at the end of the day, Unity has grown into, like a powerhouse of a development platform for games and for 3D content. Um, but they do not support publishing to the web. It's not something that they do. They can't make as much money if you don't publish into an app store. It's the same model that, like that Epic has been railing against Apple about, and there was that big decision just recently. The development of native applications that have to be published into an app store model, that's ultimately like this walled garden thing, and the VR industry is way worse than the mobile industry. It's just, it's a much smaller market. There's only however many handfuls of millions of headsets out there, maybe 50 or 100 million headsets out there total. Meta is the easily the market and industry leader in VR headset manufacturing and sales and that kind of stuff. Um, and they have this closed ecosystem model where if you build a VR experience, whether that's a game or whatever, if it's a learning experience or whatever, and it goes out into their ecosystem, they have to review it and approve it. And that review and approval process is lengthy and challenging. And most apps don't make it through, at least not the first round. Like I was actually the Unreal Engine development team that we were working with local in Asheville, super talented engineer, Justin Hamilton, a good friend of mine. They were finishing a product and trying to launch it. And I was witnessing those challenges while we were earlier in the process with the client who wanted to build something. And so I was sort of like sharing that information. I was like, okay, so are we going to publish this into like the Meta store, or do you want this as like an artifact that you'll need to buy like a dozen or 50 headsets to load directly onto, and then you'll have to manage that. That then becomes kind of like an IT like challenge of like, how do we update these things and where do the updates come from and who's managing the code base, and how do I get these updates into the headsets? Do I have to plug them in? Do I need a person to manage all of this for me? Um, and their vision for their training material was that it would be accessible. And the deeper we got down this rabbit hole, the less accessible it became. It was like, oh, VR, yeah, it's so immersive, it's going to be awesome. Like people are going to learn so fast, and it's going to be great. And it's like, cool, okay, are you going to use Unity or Unreal? Okay, what does that mean? And it's like, oh, well, you have to find an engineer who knows how to use one of these things to make your VR content. And they're like, oh, well, that sounds complicated. And I was like, yeah, and expensive, and these engineers are not cheap. And then you have to pay a license to use the tool to build the software. And then you have to choose where you're going to publish this into. At the time, Apple's headset still wasn't out. So it was pretty much like Meta's ecosystem or like the VR PC world, like through Steam. And that still comes with a license. If you publish and you charge money, you have to pay a license 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30%. Meta's App Store is 30% on top of the license of 5 or 10% that you have to pay just to use Unity or Unreal. And so you end up with a product, if you're going to sell it, is only accessible to headset users. So it's not accessible to non-headset devices, only headset devices, and only physical hardware headsets that can have access to that App Store marketplace. So to me and to the client, that was when they were like, okay, this is never going to work. There's not enough headsets. There's not a big enough market. I thought I could build something that could work in all headsets. And I was like, yeah, that's not a thing. You can't build something that works in every headset because not all headsets communicate with each other. They don't have the same App Store access. They don't, like you can go download an app, and the only way you can get an app in like the Apple Vision OS store and the Meta OS store is if the development company published the app in both places, which is a significant cost and lift. Technically, you got to have two separate code bases because there's no common code base that you can publish into either space. It's just all of these layers of hurdles and choke points and bottlenecks and walled gardens. And to me, that was the failure. And that's what started our discovery process to see if there was an alternative. It's like, hey, here's a good example of a project that kind of failed. The industry doesn't really support the kind of accessibility that this person had in their head they thought was possible. They were like, hey, I'm going to build this really great 3D VR training experience and launch it to the world. Like, yeah, like all the great intentions and excitement. And then the reality started setting in. It was like, oh, well, I can only publish to a portion of the market. Oh, and then only headset users can access it, which is even smaller and smaller segment of the population. I mean, if you build a website, then you get billions of potential users, because it's on the web. Whereas if you publish to an app store, then it's like, okay, how many headsets are there? How many users are there? How active are they? How often are they downloading apps? Wow, it's not very many. Now we're talking about tens of millions instead of billions, which is a massive difference when it comes to trying to make a decision about the life of a product. You want to try to give, like, I feel like I've been thinking about this for the AgendaKeeper. Like, do we want to have a mobile app? Are we going to build it like with React Native so we can publish into iOS and Android? Or, what does that look like? Okay, we need to focus on the web first and make it a web application so it's easily accessible from any device. Then we can figure out how to wrap that experience into a mobile experience. To me, or into a mobile app infrastructure so that someone can go to an app store and download it and access their account that way. I think, so to answer your question, I think the failure is how the best way to say this, without ruffling too many online feathers. It's a failure of the mentality and the approach that the people in powerful positions at companies like Meta and Apple that they're making. Like Zuckerberg is a great example of someone who, he wants to have all the control. And so he's got his own ecosystem and he's building hardware and he's spending billions of dollars annually and losing billions of dollars annually just to try to build the metaverse concept. But a metaverse concept doesn't work when it's a closed system, when only certain devices can access it. To me, this is one of the things that I started saying early on when we discovered how robust and unexpectedly good like React XR and WebXR and WebGL worked on the web. It's like, if right now the most common ways that people build web software is two-dimensionally. It's flat. You've got buttons and you've got sections and you've got your coordinates and your grid or flex or whatever your layout is. It's all X and Y coordinates. And what WebGL and WebXR gives you the option, and 3JS, is to be able to build content with a Y axis. So now you've got X and Y and a Z axis. So it's X and Y and Z. And now you have space. You actually have volume. You can place objects not up and down and left and right on a flat surface, but up and down and left and right and forward and backwards and in front of the user or off to the right or off to the left. And that works on the web. And when I really started to wrap my head around that, I was like, oh, everyone who's talking about the metaverse is kind of misspeaking. There's not a metaverse that we're going to build or that's coming. We already have it. It's the internet. Like, the internet is the metaverse. We have a globally connected with billions of devices. That's the metaverse. Right now, the metaverse, our version of the metaverse, is two-dimensional. And what this technology gives us the ability to do is build for that third dimension and build it in such a way that it works on any device and every device. Like the proof of concepts that we built early on at Aktiga, we have a product concept. It's called Prism XR. That's kind of on the back burner for now. But we were able to build a couple of examples of how this technology works, and we can build three-dimensional content and create a volume of space and make it so that you can interact with it on your phone, on your laptop, on a tablet. You can click and drag around or click hotspots and move around in space. And if you have a headset, you can put it on and go to that same website and explore a three-dimensional environment and go like all the way over here or all the way over there. Like as an example of scale, we have this part of the demo is you can look at a paper airplane, which is like right in front of you, and you can walk around it. You can look at like a hang glider, which is like, maybe 10, 12 feet wide, and you can be like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool and big, and you can walk all the way around it. And then you can look at a 747 and you can be like, holy shit, the tire is taller than me. Like, whoa, like that sense of scale is so much more potent in the headset. But ultimately, that content is built in such a way that it's accessible from any device. So I can go to that same website on my phone and click and move around, or I can use my phone like a little spyglass and I can explore that virtual world from any device. But if I have a headset, then I get sort of the next level of that experience where I get to actually explore it spatially, immersively. And to me, that's exciting. Like building, it's just like, I don't know, Eli, if you were a big fan of Tron growing up, but I'm a big Tron nerd. If you talk about like nerd stuff, it's like Star Trek, Star Wars, Tron. Like for me, Tron was at the top of the list. I was a Tron guy. And so thinking about the digital grid and what Flynn was trying to build and what he was trying to envision, I'm like, we have that now. Like we can build grids, infinite grids into these web environments. And obviously with AI now and the ability to generate 3D models and 3D objects and create generative spaces, there's some really cool examples of stuff. I'd be happy to share like a whole list of fun stuff to explore. And there's the 3JS Journey online course is a really great example, and the guy who created that, and he's got a really cool like portfolio website that has this little car that you can drive around. It almost looks like RC Pro-Am from back in the day, and you control it with your cursors on your laptop, and you explore his portfolio through this three-dimensional space. It's really amazing technology, and from my perspective, the web and web content is only going to get more immersive, and especially as the device side of the market matures and we get headsets that are lighter and have longer battery life and easier to wear all day, potentially glasses that work well and overlay content into your reality. I think watches are eventually going to be not necessarily replaced by, but augmented by glasses. I think that the goggles that we're kind of used to, these big, clunky, kind of heavy things, they're just going to get lighter and easier to use. And it's just going to make, accessing that kind of content easier and easier. I think Apple's Vision Pro is a great example of an amazing piece of technology that's still a little heavy and clunky. But what it represents is what's coming. And that's exciting, immersive content, 3D content, and kind of bringing this back to where it all started for me with Actiga was inside of online training concepts and the idea of building an immersive learning experience. And part of the reason why I was so convinced that I needed to start another company was sure the interest and like the wow factor, and it's really cool. And if you put a headset on and you explore some stuff to learn, it's really powerful. And you get kind of this Dorothy and Oz, aha moment where all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, now I'm in three-dimensional space and I can go explore stuff and play a game or whatever that looks like. But the research really hit me in a powerful way. There's been a lot of research for a long time about the effectiveness of VR as a medium, specifically for learning. And when I started digging into the research, I was like, oh, wow, like this really represents a significant change in our understanding of how to deliver content, especially in an online format, for people to learn something new on their own, in their own time, self-paced learning. And, the research states, there's been dozens, and I could pull a handful of reports up right now. On average, adult learners, so thinking, 18 and up, learn between 4 and 6 times faster in an immersive environment. So when you put someone in an immersive environment, they learn faster because they're interacting. It's more experiential. At the end of the day, we're talking about several blended learning models: the experiential learning model, the simulation-based training model, and the immersive learning. So experiential, simulation, and immersive. There's language professors and professionals have been talking about the immersive learning model for as long as I can remember. I mean, I remember being in middle school and high school, and they were like, an immersive learning experience, go to Spain, or go to, to learn your language, or go to Italy, or go to France and learn French. And you learn faster when you're immersed in that environment. And so what VR gives you the option is to leverage that immersive learning model and blend it with the experiential learning model in a simulated environment. So that simulated model as well. And people learn faster. So not only do they learn 4 to 6 times faster, but they retain twice as much new information. So people are not only learning faster, 4 to 6 times faster, they walk away from like a new learning experience having retained twice as much as they would in a traditional classroom experience. And so to me, that just like, it gets all of my nerd Star Trek kind of ideas running, like the holodeck, or, like these really cool ways to say, hey, I want to learn this thing, or the Matrix. And it's like, I need to learn Tai Chi, plug me in and make me learn real fast and just download that information. We still can't download data directly into human brains. Maybe we'll get there eventually. But in the meantime, this is kind of that, in my mind, is a way to download or upload new information. So like some sort of training material into a human's mind really efficiently, like really fast, and get someone to walk away really understanding that new information, like fully or nearly fully. And to me, that's super exciting. I think about accelerated learning paths and 4-year degrees that you earn in 1 year, or those kinds of experiences. Where, why does college need to be a physical thing? Why can't it be a virtual thing? I want to go attend Eli's lecture, and I want to put my headset on, and I want to be in a lecture hall and listen to Eli lecture, and I want to do that with Eli's lecture, and he's based in Asheville, and then I want to attend a lecture in India or in New Zealand or wherever. And all of a sudden, in my mind, access to education totally changes, and the barriers to higher education, quality higher education, start coming down. I'm sure, like, if I was in a leadership position at like an established higher education academic institution, I'd be worried. I'd be nervous right now, because AI as like a learning tool and content generation tool and syllabus generation tool, I spend a lot of time asking, my go-to AI system, ChatGPT. I call him Chappie because I love that movie, and he's my Chappie. And I'm like, hey, I need to understand this. Tell me more about this thing. And then I go into my own little mini learning journey, and I didn't have to use Google at all. I mean, I can't stand Google anyway, and I use DuckDuckGo just because I don't want Google to have my data. And here I'm having an interaction with the internet through an AI system, and I'm learning. And so I feel like what that represents as the potential future for online learning and like immersive learning and really successful accelerated learning experiences is, I mean, it just feels super exciting to me. Like that's the stuff that I nerd out about. It's like, both from a learning perspective and like from a gaming perspective, and gamifying learning, and kind of blending those two worlds together in a really fun and exciting way. I feel like we're really right at the beginning of this whole new era. It's the stuff that keeps me up at night.
Fair enough. But one thing I'm wondering though is like, so like with what you're talking about, like with VR, AR, MR, all this stuff. And again, with AI and that kind of thing, it isn't this interesting question though of when you start trying to develop projects before the roadmap for how to develop those projects have been created. And again, you have clients that are paying you. It's one thing when the boss pays you, but it's like when you have clients paying you. Have you figured out a good system? And like with that one client, did it work at like were they frustrated at the industry, the project, or you? And like, and have you figured out a system? Because like with what you're doing moving forward, it seems like you're still trying to be at the forefront. So you're still going to be finding times when the road just ends. Like, have you found a good system for dealing with that, like expectations management and that type of thing?
That's a great question. Yeah, the client at the time was definitely frustrated, and not with us, because they were kind of on the same journey of discovery that we were with them. And when they came to us, they were like, "I know this isn't exactly what you do, but this is what I'm interested in. Would you be willing to help?" And I was like, "Sure." Like I ironically, I know someone who runs an Unreal Engine development team. It's just two or three of them, but they know what they're doing, and I trust his judgment and perspective on this stuff. And so let's go into it and see what we can't figure out together. Um, I think you bring up a great point. At the end of the day, when you're dealing with clients, communication is critical. Like what's the expectation, and then what's the agreement, or what's the understanding of what's to come of this expectation. Like, oh, I expect to pay you, and you're going to build me the thing that I want. And so I try with online training concepts, at first, there was a lot of conversation about how do we work and how do we communicate with clients. And I'm trying to kind of implement a similar approach inside of Actiga, where, there's a lot of custom development companies that are much, much bigger than us. Our team is still pretty small. And a lot of times it's like, hey, I need this thing, or I want help. How much is it going to cost? And they're like, it's going to cost X. And they just give you one price. And if you pay that price, they'll build you your thing. And I feel like in many ways that's a failure in communicating an expectation, because a lot of people think they can pay once for some sort of software or some sort of product, and that's it. And Eli, software's never done. Like you can build the first version, but then it's like, oh, now we're scaling and we have these infrastructure problems and we need to refactor, and oh, now we need to migrate into a different system because we need to containerize, and and then so it's like you can start with one price, but then everything that you do moving forward is always going to cost more, and whether that's going to cost more money or time, or you have to build a team to be able to support it. So there's not a singular cost. I feel like that's a similar failure in the construction industry, where you say, I want this custom home, and they say it's going to cost you $7 million. And then by the end of it, you paid $9.5 million. And they're like, oh, well, there were some changes, and, it just happens. Um, and, and even their contract price has built in a lot of cushion for margin of error, and a lot of upcharging for materials and labor. And every subcontractor that works on a home, they just charge the builder, and then the builder just upcharges the client. So it just inflates the cost at multiple steps and at multiple levels. And I'm trying to create a model that's not built on that same kind of overinflated cost approach. It's like, we think it's going to cost this much, but we can't say for sure. So we offer clients a range. It's like, we think on the low side, it'll be this. On the high side, it'll be this. And that's just when we're talking about the scope that we've tried to outline through our discovery process. Like, what's the scope? What features do you want? How are we going to build it? What's the tech stack that we think is going to make the most sense for this? And then what's your plan for the future? We can charge you between this and this to get it up and running, but then what are you going to do later? Who's going to maintain and manage that for you? Are you going to hire someone? Great. We'll onboard them as we're finishing the project, and then you're off and running with your thing. Do you want us to help you maintain and manage it as you continue to grow? That's great. We can create that agreement, set that expectation, so that we're all on the same page moving forward. So I think, kind of going back to that first client and clients that we're communicating with now, I'm trying to bring this like, hey, we're a time and materials shop. Like, we just charge you for the time it takes us, and any like third-party system or platform or hosting and deployment platform that we're using, it's going to cost this, and that's what you're going to pay, and then the only thing you're going to pay us for is the time that it takes our team to build it. And so we track our hours, we send you a bill every 2 weeks, and you pay, and that's it. And that's trying to create a little bit more clarity in that communication process and a greater degree of understanding and what is the cost of software really. I feel like how we approach that I see as a little bit different from the way that most software development agencies do it. And my hope, and so far my experience has been that people really appreciate it. They like that level of transparency. They're happy to pay, and they're excited to see the progress every 2 weeks or every month. And so, and that's the other thing about software is things are always changing. As soon as I think invariably, I'm sure you've seen this a lot. When someone has got an idea, they come up with a scope, they start building, and then as soon as they see it, they have other ideas. Oh, could it do this? And wow, what about that? Like that's scope creep. That's exactly what that is. And our answer is sure, it can do anything you want it to do. We just have to add that to the scope, and it's just going to take more time, which means it's going to cost more money. At the end of the day, I think as long as we're setting the expectation really clearly in the first conversation and in any and every subsequent conversation about what is this process like, what should you expect as a stakeholder in this product or software system that you want for your business or it's a product idea and you want to bring it to market, like whatever your vision and your goals are for this thing, let's make sure that they're not unrealistic. That this is technology, and technology is constantly changing. It's like the pace at which it's changing feels like it's accelerated significantly over the past few years with the advent of AI. And now we have the ability to use other systems to help us, expand our capacity and leverage AI coding tools like Cursor to be able to write code more quickly, which hopefully translates into savings for the client or for the customer who wants to pay us to build some stuff for them. I see the same thing with vibe coding products, like Lovable and Replit and Bolt.new and all of these really cool things, and V0, and they're great. And I just as an experience, I built a little product concept myself with a vibe coder and vibe coding platform. And then I asked my engineers, I was like, take a look at this code. Tell me what you think. And they were like, this is awful, And I was like, oh, God, no, that's not good. So we can't even really use this. And a good friend of mine, Joel from the track, we got to talking about this. And he was like, don't think of these vibe coding products as a way to build a scalable finished solution. He's like, at the end of the day, these things they're tools that are ideal for rapid prototyping. You can give it some prompts, you can build some functionality, some things will break. You can work through those challenges and problems with it until it basically functionally works. And it's just like one step beyond that, like interactive Figma prototype or something, where it's actually clickable, it's deployed on the web, you can send them a link and they can play around with it. He's like, treat that as just part of the process and don't expect to have much or any usable code. Like your engineers are going to be opinionated about the way the conventions are adhered to or not with this vibe coding platform. They're going to want to build it in the way that they think works best. Every engineer likes to think that they know the best way to build software, and I totally get that, and that's totally fine. And as long as the team is agreed on those conventions, then you can build software together as a team. And and also these vibe coding tools can be really useful and beneficial in that process of spinning something up really quickly and saying, is this what you meant, to the client? Oh, you want that button to do something different. Okay, cool. Let's tweak that up. And then once it's functional, it's like, cool, we're going to throw that away, but we're going to hand it to the development team and say, cool, here's the thing. Now let's rebuild it, And so I think that's the piece that a lot of people are missing. They're like, I just built this product and I used Lovable or I used Replit and it's amazing and it's going to scale. And it's like, no, it's not. Like maybe AI will get there, but right now, if you interact with these things and you ask it to do something, it's like, I spend time with Lovable almost every day now because I get 5 free credits every day and I use them. And I ask it to do something, and then it's like, cool, I did it, and it didn't do it right, and it's like broken and returning an error, and I'm like, no, you didn't do it right. Try again, and it's like, oh, I didn't do it right. Sorry about that. Let me try again, and then it rewrites all the code, and it still breaks. It's not like it fixes it on the first try. It takes prompt after prompt after prompt for it to finally figure out what it did wrong. I think my hope is that will get better in the future, but for now it's not great. It's a tool. It's useful. It's interactive. It's a way for people to feel like they're having like a coding experience. I'm not an engineer. I don't write a lot of code, but I love these tools because they feel like it just um, makes it more accessible to me. I can sit down and I don't have to bother one of my engineers and be like, well, what about this idea? Like, what do you think? I can do that with ChatGPT, and then I can plug that into Lovable and see what it spits out and be like, oh, that was actually a cool idea and it works, or that was a terrible idea and it doesn't work the way that I thought it did.
So with that, so okay, so you've got OTC, you've got Atiga, you've got AgendaKeeper. So as far as I understand, you started as like a musician, right?
Yes.
So how do you get from musician to coding stuff for VR, having a VR company? Like what was that?
That's a great question. Um, my my technical background is audio engineering, so that's kind of like, if there was a path for me into the world of tech, it was through the world of audio. Um, I was, I got my first job working as a recording engineer at a studio, like in, gosh, 2018, 2019. Oh, no, 1999. Sorry, a long time ago. 99, to like 98, 99, 2000. And then when I landed in Brevard in 2002, I started work study on the production crew at the Porter Center it's their performing arts hall at Brevard College. And I ended up working there for 6 years, both as an audio technician and a lighting technician, and basically like, a production manager for the facility there. Got a lot of work and met a lot of really cool people in the audio production world. So Downtown After Five events and live staging and lighting and audio production and festivals, and that was really my more technical background. Is working as a, sure, I was playing music and working, gigging some as a drummer and as a musician in general. Um, but but the experience taught me a lot about, ironically, what I find a lot of value in now. When you work at a theater and you're thinking about lighting, and then you're talking with someone about VR and 3D, one of the first things that they're asking is lighting, and light source and quality of light and material finish, and is it reflective or is it refractive, or is it, like, what's the shader material that you're using? And so, I've unexpectedly found a lot of use and value in that background, in that experience working in theater and working in theatrical production. It goes back even further. My mom's actually a ballet teacher, and so I grew up around classical music and ballet and production. And she would have a recital every other year. I was like probably 8 years old, and I was making mixtapes for her recitals, and she's like giving me all the tapes, and she's like, "We need this song, and then this song from this other tape." And so I was like making mixtapes for her, and then I was sitting up in the booth with the headset on and pressing play and pressing pause and sitting next to the lighting engineer, and like that's where all this stuff kind of connects those dots for me, is those experiences working more in theater and in theatrical production. And so, the jump from theater and audio production and engineering into technology, it didn't feel as scary to me at first. Like my path took me, from Brevard, and in 2002 got my first degree in organizational leadership in 2004, and then I went back for a second degree in music performance, um, and graduated in 2008, um, and immediately started to kind of like leads us into the world of, um,
Oh, you're breaking up.
aviation and paragliding. Uh-oh, I'm breaking up. I just got a note that said my internet is unstable. Maybe it's better now.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, it got to be a little bit better. Okay, so 10 seconds before
Sorry.
paragliding, something led you into paragliding.
Yes. So I was living in Brevard, and yeah, I've always been um, an enthusiast for aviation. And I was just a kid who grew up with Top Gun and wanted to be a fighter pilot and all that stuff. And so um, wasn't sure what that looked like for me. I wasn't sure I wanted to spend the money to become a pilot, like with an actual like private pilot license. Uh-oh.
You're yelling.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I gotcha. Bummer. Huh. No, sorry about that. Are we better now?
Oh, we're weird. I
Still
see
not?
you, but your lips and your voice are no longer matching.
Yikes.
Oh, that's a little. Yeah, now you're back to white. Now you're back to good, I think.
Okay. I think maybe that's just the life of being not on a great internet connection where I'm at, you know? Um, so, uh, I mean, like, I'm interested in a lot of things. Aviation was always one of those things. Um, I got into skydiving and was really interested in canopy flight and paragliding, and met some people who knew all about the world of paragliding at the time. And paragliding is not a huge thing in the U.S. And so I ended up going out to Utah and learning how to fly paragliders in 2008, 2009, and flew for about 10 years and decided to become an instructor. And so that's really where the story of online training concepts begins. Is I was working as a general contractor and running my own carpentry business and doing audio engineering and playing music on the side. So I mean, like, definitely entrepreneurial, kind of doing a lot of different things anyway. Working as an engineer, as an audio engineer at a theater with an audio production company in Asheville, doing carpentry during the day, doing music performances, both as a musician and as an engineer on the weekends, and then got into flying and got into ultralight aviation and really fell in love with it. And when I was doing my instructor training back in 2017, 2018, they were like, hey, here's the syllabus that you can use with your students. And it was like a 90 something page PDF document. And I was like, well, that seems crazy. I don't think I want to use that. You know, like, it's no one's going to read that. It's basically like a bad textbook. So I asked for permission to create some kind of online resource. I contacted the author of the syllabus and then built a really simple website using Wix. It was like, I was like, Wix or Squarespace or WordPress, like, what am I going to do? And built a really simple website that was just online, really basic online learning material. First year, a bunch of people found out about it. There was no online learning resources for paragliding or hang gliding students. And like a dozen instructors and schools globally started finding out about it. And then they started asking for features and, hey, could it record quiz results? And hey, could it, could I see a report of those? And could I get an email when they complete the course so I can give them a certificate and know that they did all their like ground school, that kind of like textbook learning, that it's complete. So I know as their instructor. And I was like, oh, these are great questions. And they sound really complicated. And I don't really have any idea what I'm doing. So I ended up connecting with a freelance WordPress developer and moved the project from Wix to WordPress, and then started learning WordPress with a freelancer, and built a custom plugin and started working with learning management software. And that's really where all of that began. And so, people were so excited about the product that they were like, hey, I want my students to use this. And I think it's a great resource. Can I have them pay you for it? And I was like, sure. I haven't figured out how to monetize it yet. And they're like, just put a PayPal donate button on the site and I'll make sure all of my students pay you. And so I was like, okay. And like that, that first 6 months that the PayPal button was up, I think I brought in $5,000 or something. So I was like, wow, this is working. And what should I do with this money? And should I put it into a new business? And that's when I was like, okay, I need a kind of a vague but general sounding online learning business name. And that's where Online Training Concepts LLC came from. It was like, okay, now I can get a bank account and I can put that money there and I can figure out what to do with it. And I was still running my carpentry company um, right up until like the pandemic started, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to put carpentry down and contracting down, and I need to just focus on this. And so I went full time with the business in early 2020, and Sarah joined the business in late 2020, and really the business kind of took on a life of its own.
Huh. So, I mean, there's not non-technical founders. You seem pretty not technical then. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
can
When
you?
it comes to being non-technical, I mean, like audio engineering isn't really technical. At least it doesn't really have anything to do with software and with web development. You know.
Yeah. What? So have you?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a little. So have you gone through any boot camps or anything, or any college, or? Yep. Are we there?
What's that? Sorry.
Okay, probably
Yeah.
not.
There
So
you
have you
are.
gone through like any college or any boot camp? Like, have you gone through like any official training on the technical side? Oops.
Mm-mm.
This is
No, I mean the closest thing that I've gotten to from any official.
oops.
Sorry. Let me try something real quick.
All right. So I'll just do a little intermission dance for everybody. Wah wah. Boo doo doo doo. Boo doo doo doo. Wah wah. Boo doo 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 doo. This is what's called thinking on your feet, boys and girls. Okay, there we go. You're back.
All right, I'm back. I just switched to my hotspot. I'm hoping that's going to be a little better.
All right, good deal. Okay, so yes, you haven't done boot camps, right? Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. So, okay, so one of the big things is it's kind of funny. It's like so many of the smartest people I know, hyper technical. Again, there's this whole thing with imposter syndrome, right? I mean, like these guys are brilliant. They've been through God knows how much education, God knows how much experience, and then they're like, "Shit, I should go be a carpenter. I'm a fucking idiot." Like they can't. And so, like, what? How do you not know enough to have imposter syndrome, or how do you get around imposter syndrome? Are you not trained
Uh-huh.
well enough to doubt yourself?
That's a great question. No, I think I definitely deal with imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm not a technical founder, and you know, I'm here running a tech business um, with people who I consider to be way smarter than me, um, and so you know, I think the way that I deal with it is to focus on the things that I know that are kind of my expertise. You know, my expertise is more management and building the team and identifying people who are going to be a good fit and trying to develop culture. You know, like how do we manage meetings? How do we communicate internally? How do we set expectations internally within the team for everybody who works together? What do I do to reinforce those things? How can I be a good example for both our team and the business and in the community as a representative of the business? Those kinds of things. You know, I feel like um, tech businesses are kind of plagued by this, from my perspective, an over reliance on technical founders, because I think technical founders are more often than not great leaders and they're not great managers, and then they get a lot of money thrown at them and they grow a big product, and then everyone wonders why they're such an asshole and why the culture sucks and it feels like a toxic environment to work, you know. And it's like, because we're not actually preparing these technical people to be good leaders. You know, like you can be technical and have a, you know, great background in computer science or engineering or software development, but that does not mean that you're going to be good at leading people or managing people or running a team of people or communicating with people who are creative and not technical, you know. And so I feel like my role at the business is try to live at that intersection. I feel more like a product person. If I have a title, it's CEO and more like product lead. I'm trying to talk with the users, and I'm trying to talk with the designers, and I'm talking with the engineers, and I'm trying to bring as much technical um, awareness as I can, as best I can, not being a non-technical founder, to the table, and constantly asking questions about how does that work, and tell me more, and what can I learn more about that particular piece of our stack, or the technical side of what we're doing. But how does that relate with the design, and how does that relate with our creative folks, and then how do we communicate that with the client, or with the shareholder or the stakeholder. So I feel like, as an entrepreneur, my my expertise is leadership, and my role is to be a good leader, and to be a good communicator, and serve in that, like, in the middle of the Venn diagram, and have a direct connection to the technical team, and a direct connection to the design and creative team, and a direct connection to the end user, and try to make decisions that 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 everyone can feel like they're on the same page about, and that they're on board with. At the end of the day, um, a lot of technical businesses fail because there's this massive gap in that piece of how do you grow a successful business doesn't necessarily always mean how do you grow a successful product. It's how do you grow a successful team. Any product that has any kind of life to it, especially as a technical product, is going to need a lot of people to support it. Like, as you get to scale, you need, like, whole team of people who are worried about uptime and reliability and all of that stuff. You're going to need a whole team of people who are working on the next set of features, and you need a team of people who are testing for QA, and are things stable, and did the feature that we just rolled out, did it break everything else? It's like, this is all right now still 100% reliant on people power. Like, you still have to have enough people to write the code, and to test the code, and to test the product. And you got to have a team of people who can design the product, and have a good brand, and have a good UI, and a good user experience. There's lots of products out there that have really bad user experiences, and some of the UI decisions that they're making. It's like, who's in charge of that team, and are they listening to their users, or are they listening to their users too much? It's like, it's all those things. So if there's imposter syndrome stuff that I deal with, it's more about, like, am I showing up enough for my team? Am I doing enough for my team? Am I making sure that they have the resources that they need? Um, and then I feel bad about not being able to pay them what I think they deserve. Like, hey, I wish I had more money, and I don't, and so I have to ask my team to be okay with that, working for part-time hours, or for less than they typically would get. And what I'm finding is this validation, and, like, what's important to the people who work for Actiga now is the fact that they work on a team. And that's really important to me. Like, I know that I can't do this on my own. I need technical people, and I need creative people, and product people, and marketing people to be able to make all of this stuff work, and for Actiga to be a sustainable and scalable business. Um, and so it's more about making sure that I'm communicating what I can do, where I'm at, and what I'm struggling with the team, so that they're all aware. I'm not just some boss dude who's out there doing his own thing, or whatever. Like, I'm doing everything that I can to try to support the team. At the end of the day, that's my role. My role is to support my people.
So with your tech stacks and all that, then do you have a technical co-founder, technical lead? Like, how do you validate that 5 years from now your tech stack isn't a legacy just crap show, right? Where you build the thing that the guy you currently have thinks is great, and then again, a couple of years from now, people are like, "What the hell is this mess?" How do you again, when you're, you've got AWS, you got Azure, you got all these different coding languages. How do you figure out that tech stack and what will become legacy for you?
That's a great question. When we started, it was something that we kind of decided on collectively. There were three engineers and myself when Aktiga started, and so that was it. And we had one part-time UI designer who was working with us, and it was, what's our stack? Like, if we're going to build a tech business, what's our tech stack? What feels like it's going to be the most maintainable, the most supported, the easiest to deal with in the long term. Like, we don't want to just kind of pick the new hot thing and expect it to be something that lasts a long time. And so a lot of time and energy went into that kind of decision making process early on. It was, okay, we want to build using TypeScript, we want to build using React, we want to deploy using Next.js, and we want to try to make this something that is as common and as widespread as possible. Obviously, there's like Python, and there's C plus or C sharp, and there's and then there's JavaScript stacks. There's full stack JavaScript stacks, and I basically made the decision and tried to support the decision that we made as a team to go with, one, what we were already most familiar with, and two, what we felt like was going to be sustainable. Like, what can we use that's going to get us what we need right now, and then hope that this is going to be a common tech stack in the future that doesn't end up in a situation where it's falling apart, or it's legacy, or it's no longer supported, or it's being deprecated, or whatever that looks like. So those decisions definitely came from the team. I tried to lean on some technical advisors early on. Like, I think that's another part of the entrepreneurial journey, is recognizing what you're good at and leaning into that, and then where your gaps are and what you need support with, and then reaching out and finding that support, and saying, hey, I don't know a lot about this. I need some technical guidance. And so I had some pretty great folks early on that were offering feedback and listening to my questions and interacting with me and the team, and kind of helping us make those decisions. So even though we didn't have a technical founder, I still felt like I had access to that kind of technical founder level, like perspective. And to be really transparent, Joel Bergstein is a good friend of mine, and he's a really brilliant and gifted engineer and system architect and system designer, and he was a DevOps manager for a company in Asheville that was acquired, and much of what was happening early on with Actiga, I brought to him, and I was like, Joel, what do you think? Like, are these the right kind of decisions that we're making? Is this the right kind of tech stack? And it was funny because he's like, well, what are your people familiar with? And he's like, and I was like, well, what are you familiar with? And he's like, well, I'm a C#.NET guy. And he's like, and you're probably not going to want to do that, And I was like, okay, we probably shouldn't do that, because I've got 3 JavaScript developers, so we need to build a JavaScript stack, and he's been gracious enough to, like, to serve in kind of a fractional, technical leadership role, and make his perspective and his brain power available to us, over the whole time that Actiga has been a thing. I've had lots and lots and lots of meetings with him, and trying to support his business up until the flood when it was destroyed, and was super bummed. And from a leadership perspective, what can I offer him? And then from a technical perspective, what he can offer me. So I think, part of the experience of starting a business is not to think that you need to have everything on your team when you start. Lean into the support that the community can offer. And that's one of the things that's really nice about Asheville, is there's a pretty robust entrepreneur support community. There's Venture Asheville, there's Mountain BizWorks, Hatch kind of trying to do its thing. It's, maybe not great, but, there's still people who are associated with all of these organizations that are willing to offer their time, to, as a mentor or as an advisor, or as like a, hey, let's spitball some things and use me as a sounding board or something. And, I think it's really important for people who are thinking about starting a business, lean into that, find a community, find a cohort. Like when you asked about boot camps, like, I didn't do coding boot camps. I did like entrepreneur boot camps. It was like, here's an incubator program, here's a cohort, here's a training program. This is 4 weeks, this is 8 weeks, this is, this is 90 days, this is 8 months, and so that's really where I've been putting my time is how am I leveraging the support system and the network in Western North Carolina and in North Carolina as a whole? How am I leveraging that to support me as an entrepreneur? Like what resources am I lacking, and can I find them? And are they available to me? And am I asking the right questions? And so I think imposter syndrome comes up for a lot of people when they're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, like, holy shit, like, what was I thinking? And I think the way that I've tried to deal with that is say, okay, I don't know what I'm talking about. Who does? And who does that's nearby? And that might spend an hour letting me buy them coffee or lunch and ask them questions and say, what would you do? What do you think? And then bring that back to the team and say, well, this is what this really smart person said. What do you guys think? And trying to make those decisions as best we can through consensus. I think businesses that are led more like dictatorships are doomed to fail. And I think culture ultimately ends up very toxic when you have a leadership structure that's a lot of top down and everything shit rolls downhill. That whole concept. And I think businesses that are more successful and sustainable in the long run are ones that are built with much more of a consensus style approach to decision making and leadership and management, and thinking about things the other way around. Like I feel like I work for the people who, like from other people's perspective, they work for me, but I'm like, no, that's the other way around. Like I work for the team. I'm here to create the systems and the support that they need to be successful. And that's how I want to build the business. I want to build it the other way around, like the kind of an inverted model where leadership is at the bottom of the pyramid, and our role is to support the people that work with us.
That's good. So I think one of the big problems nowadays is people are very doom and gloom about the world, and they think everybody's so greedy and they just want. So when you're going out there and you're finding these advisors, I guess the question then is, again, Joel, you know Joel, but the other advisors you found, one, how did you find them? And then two, like, did you have to pay them? Did you have to give them equity? Was a cup of coffee enough to get an hour of information out of them? Like, what does that actually look like in the real world?
Um, I mean, maybe it speaks to the supportive nature of Asheville as a community. And maybe it's more about like the spirit of entrepreneurship and wanting to support that in general. But my experience in Asheville, and really in all of the experiences that I've had with advisors and mentors and mentorship programs and cohort programs across the state, is that people are happy to offer their 2 cents, and want to stay involved. And um, I don't think I've had a single mentor ask me for equity. Um, it's like most of these people are successful. They've either retired or they've had an exit or multiple exits, or they're in a leadership position, working as a CTO or a fractional CTO for three or four, or a COO for two or three businesses or whatever. And when they can see pretty clearly that you're, like that I'm trying to build a business and I'm doing my best and I'm asking for guidance, 99% of the time that's met with generosity. And sure, a cup of coffee is more than enough. Or a lunch is more than enough. And then they want follow up, and they want to hear what's the next step, and what was the decision that I made based on the conversation that I had with them. If there's some saving grace and a light in the world, it's that like collaborative, supportive spirit, that I think exists in the business world when people see that you have a vision, or you have drive, and you're motivated, even if your focus isn't exactly 100% like dialed and targeted. But if you're passionate and you're pursuing it, that's obvious. Like people see it, and they appreciate it, they value it. I mean, my experience has been people appreciate and value like the energy that I bring to the table, and the passion and the fire that I have to try to build the tech ecosystem in Asheville. And then they're like, cool, how can I help? And I mean, more often than not, the question is, what do you need from me and what can I do to help? Like that's what people say. And I think what happens is a lot of people who are at an early stage in their idea or their business, they're afraid to ask. Maybe that's part of that imposter syndrome thing. And if there's one thing that I'll say as a piece of advice to anyone who's watching this who might be thinking about starting a business, ask for help. Ask everybody. Like find the cohorts and the entrepreneur support programs and the pressure test or like whatever that looks like. If you have access to that in your community or it's within an hour or two, go and do that and ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think the thing that's the hardest for people who are struggling with imposter syndrome is they think they have to know already and they have to have it all figured out. And as an entrepreneur, you can't. There's no way to have it all figured out. And even as you grow your business, you can't expect to know everything. I think that's what keeps me going as a non-technical founder of a tech business. Like, I don't know it all. There's no way I can know it all. I have to rely on my team and the advisors and the community of people and the network that I'm building. I have to rely on that. And if I expect to know it of myself, I'm always going to struggle with imposter syndrome and with that like crushing anxiety of not knowing it all and having it all figured out, because that's unrealistic. At the end of the day, a lot of imposter syndrome stuff comes up from expectations that are unrealistic of yourself. Like I think one thing that I'll say about being an entrepreneur is if you don't think therapy's a good thing, don't be an entrepreneur. Like, because you can't be an entrepreneur if you have never gone to therapy. Like I can say that confidently. I'm a believer in the power and the benefit of therapy and the therapeutic experience. I've been in lots of therapy in my life. I'm in therapy currently, and I probably will be for most of the rest of my life, because I think part of being human means that we need help, means that we need support, means that we need therapy. Probably we all have complicated childhood experiences, some way worse than others, but they set us up as adults to have baggage. Like we have baggage. That's normal. That's human. And to expect to figure it all out on your own with no support, especially on the mental health side of things, is totally unrealistic. One of the things that I wrote down as just like a saying is like, leaders, like when you talk about therapy and like doing your work and like doing your work, you can't be a good leader if you're not willing to do your own work, and you can't focus on your own benefit. And what am I struggling with? Am I struggling in my personal relationship with my partner, or do I have a complicated relationship with my parents, whether they're alive or not, or my siblings? If I'm not willing to do the work to get better at having those kinds of relationships, then there's no way I'm ever going to be successful trying to run a business full of other people with their own baggage. Like we all have stuff, and that comes out in unexpected ways, and people trigger you and you get mad and then you want to yell at them. And it's like, yelling and getting triggered is like common toxic work environment experiences. Bosses that suck and they take their shit out on the people who work for them. And to me, that's a failure in leadership. If you're yelling at your people and you're pissed at your wife or your husband because they did burn the steak, or who knows, whatever, or you're pissed at your kids because they failed the math test, and then you come into work and you dump that on your people, that is the easiest way to lose the best people at any business. They are not going to stay. They're not going to want to work for you because you're an asshole. At the end of the day, if you want to be a good leader, don't be an asshole. And a really great way to not be an asshole is to go get some therapy. So I mean, like, I feel like it's kind of like obvious to me now that I've been in this world long enough. I can't expect myself to be a good leader if I'm not working on myself. I can't expect to inspire other people to do great work or be a great manager or build a great team and build a great culture if I'm not working on that within myself. So I feel like that's a critical piece of the of the puzzle that not a lot of people talk about. We talk about this mental health crisis and all this stuff and how hard it is at work and imposter syndrome and all these things. And these are things you have to work through with a professional, with a trained professional. It's like imposter syndrome is just one other syndrome that we all struggle with. Attention deficit disorder. I am a ADHD kid, 100%. And the way that I deal with that is through my therapeutic work. And I feel like I would be failing my team and I would be failing as a leader and as an entrepreneur if I wasn't doing that work. I think if there's one big takeaway from my perspective for anybody who's considering starting their own business as an entrepreneur, whether it's technical or if it's a restaurant or a brewery, get some therapy first, and then expect that you're going to need it the whole time you're doing this kind of work. It's unrealistic to think that you can handle it on your own, and to try to put that burden on the people around you, whether that's your team or your partners, um, or your kids or your spouse or whatever, is putting too much weight, too much burden on them. Like that's all our own burden to carry. Like we all have our baggage. That's our burden, and you can carry it or you can work on it. And I'm way more interested in working on it because I want that burden to get lighter. So, and it's like part of being human. It's change is constant, and if you're not willing to embrace change and you're not trying to work on yourself and make improvements, this whole concept of software as a continuous improvement effort. Like people are a continuous improvement effort. And if you're not working on yourself and working on improving yourself and your personal growth and your development, then how can you ever expect that people are going to want to hang out with you or going to want to work with you, especially if you're the boss? If you're the boss, like even more important that you do your work and try to show up having dealt with your stuff so that you're not taking your shit out on your people, like that. That's one of the things that drives me crazy when people I meet in town tell me their horror stories of their boss that walked in the room and he started yelling at everybody and people are crying in the corner. I'm like, that's abuse. Like that should be criminal. Like that shouldn't be allowed. That's insane. You know?
Fair enough. So one thing I see like with you, so you did the million cups and you're obviously doing this. And when I see you on LinkedIn, you're flying all over the place. I don't know whether to be jealous or to not be jealous. It's like that's either great or exhausting. I'm not sure which. So it's interesting. So you're not the technical person though. Like one of the issues that people can run into with running these tech business types of things is the whole question of are you really doing work or have you just found a politically correct way to waste time? So like like you see so many people, they'll go to meetups or they'll go to these events and they haven't shipped a damn thing in 2 years. And you're like, have you shipped anything yet? No. Why are you still here? So how do you figure out like are you actually hitting like the deliverables that you expect out of yourself? Or do you, I mean, it gets to be easy. It's like, look, I can either bust my ass tonight or I can go and schmooze for 3 hours. Like, how do you deal with that kind of thing?
That's a good question. I haven't really had that come up for me, like at least in terms of the question. Um, Partly because I feel like I'm so focused on like working as hard as I can to make this thing successful. Um, and that includes like going to events and presenting at 1 Million Cups or pitching at Venture Connect in Raleigh or getting involved in other pitch or presentation style events or conferences or whatever that looks like. So um, I think a lot of what's expected of me, both from my own perspective and from my team's perspective, is that part of the culture that we're building is that we're all doing our best, and so I'm doing my best and trying to make decisions about where I'm putting my energy and where am I spending my time and how am I presenting to the world, and like what events am I targeting that I want to go to and participate in or present for or pitch in front of other people to create exposure for the product or for the business or for the team or whatever. um, and you know it's just as realistic for me to have expectations about what features and functionality and code that we're shipping for the product, to make the product better so we can sell it, as it is for the team to have expectations for me, and what I'm doing to help promote the product. At the end of the day, as a CEO, you're kind of all the things. I'm the chief revenue officer, and I'm the chief marketing officer, and I'm the chief operations officer, and I have to also try to fill that chief technical officer or get advisors to help me fill that role as best I can. Um, and so, the people who I see that don't feel like they have the fire in their belly, and they're out there schmoozing or taking what it feels like the easy train or the an easier path. I think what I notice are people that do that come from a place of privilege. So they already have enough money, or they already have a stable product, and their desire to hustle is gone. There's a fine line of like what's hustling too much, and what pushes you towards burnout, and that like hustle culture kind of concept, and then what's enough hustle. Like you got to have some gumption, and you got to have some desire, and you got to have some get up and go in there. Otherwise, nothing's really going to happen. And if you're out there schmoozing and you're not shipping code and you don't really have a team, or your team's kind of slacking, then the thing's doomed for failure. I think those kinds of things have their own little blips and their own little bell curves, and they happen and then they die, or they get lucky enough and somebody wants to acquire it, or who knows what. Um, but like from my perspective, it's usually really obvious. Like whether or not someone's motivated, whether or not they have a vision, or there's any clarity around what they're trying to do, what they're talking about, who they're talking to, who are they spending their time with, what kind of events are they spending their time at. I feel like it's really easy to get a sense from people like on LinkedIn. It's like, where are they going? What are they doing? What are they spending their time doing? Oh, they're going to this conference, they're going to this thing, they're giving a presentation, they're witnessing a presentation, they're talking about how cool the presentation was. It's easy to get a sense for what makes that person tick, what drives that person. Like I feel like when I witness your posts in LinkedIn, like I know you're running and you're trying to keep your weight down, which I appreciate, and I appreciate doing that in the public and shipping it in public, as it were, with your health, which I value, and also like caring about creating educational material for people, and making it accessible. And I feel like that's one of the things that I really appreciate and respect and admire about your work, is that you care about that stuff, and that comes through in what you're doing, what you're saying, the events that you're going to, these kinds of things that you're hosting. And so it's easy to pick up on that. So I think, when we're talking about seeing that kind of laziness in the world, or seeing people out there that seem like they are kind of slack, it's like, okay, well, this isn't someone that I need to necessarily spend a lot of time with. Like good for them. And if they have their own money and they can ride their own blip and their own wave, like high five, go do your thing. Like I'm not in that position. I'm not independently wealthy. I've put my entire life savings into this business, and I'm really trying my best to make it survive, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't, then I've dug myself a big hole, and it's not going to be a fun one to dig out of on my own.
So with this stuff, so you're out there, you're doing these events, you're bringing people in. So you're like a not technical co-founder, but at least for AgendaKeeper, what you're talking about with a million cups is you brought in somebody specifically for business development. So how is she in her business development position different, and how does that add to what you're doing?
Oh, that's a great question. She has her name is Morgan Porter, and she has a bunch of experience. She was living in Austin for 11 years, working with a couple different B2B SaaS companies in PR and in marketing. She's kind of an SEO nerd, and so she's got a bunch of awareness about how marketing and SEO have to work together, and your content has to, you know, speak to the message that you're trying to rank for, and what are those keywords, and all of those details. And that stuff that ultimately has always been a bit of a blind spot for me. Like, I recognize how important that is, and I just have never had the time or the bandwidth to be able to put attention and energy into that. And so I think that's almost always like people who have come to Actiga when we started there's just four of us. And the people who've come to the business have showed up, and they talk to me and they talk to the team, and they're like, what are you doing? Wow, this seems really cool. And there's almost always like okay, like, what do we have collectively on our team, and what are we lacking? And what kind of role might be really beneficial for us. So like the first few people that we added to the team were all in service of our process. It was like, hey, we need someone to review pull requests. Like, we just need someone who's a senior engineer who's got lots of experience writing code, who can just review it. Because for a team of three, to have one of them reviewing everybody's code, and then to ask one of the other ones to review his code, like, that's hard. Like, that's a hard process to try to dial in. So it was like, okay, we need a pull request review person. Let's pull them in. And so we found someone who's a great fit, Steve Meister. He's an awesome dude and really talented engineer, and has really served at that, like, okay, I'm going to review everybody's code, and I'm going to tell you what's good and what's not good. And like pretty much every person that it's like, oh, we really struggle with our UX. Like, we've got a great product designer and the UI is fantastic, but we need someone who can help with like understanding the user flow and the user journey and the user experience. And so, like, let's talk with some of those people. And we met this woman, Rachel Shearer, and she's fantastic. And she just joined the team recently. And it's like, wow, there's so much more substance to that part of our process that we weren't giving, enough attention to or enough energy to. So now having someone who really embodies that and can bring that perspective to the table and have that mindset of what's the user experience. Nope, I don't like that user journey goes too many steps or too many clicks, or we're way off the rails here. Like, let's get this thing so that we get from point A to point B as smoothly and quickly and as intuitively as possible. And so she fills that role really well. Same thing with Morgan. It's like, hey, like, I know I'm doing my best to market this thing, and I'm going to events, and I'm talking about things, and I'm presenting, and I'm posting on LinkedIn, and I'm like, what else do I need to do? Like, shit, I don't even know. And I'm like I need some support from someone who knows that world and knows what's going to make an impact on our search results. Are we ranking for the kinds of things that we want people to find us for? Are we getting any organic search traffic? Is our SEO totally in shambles? And do we need to take a look at that and get it fixed up? And when Morgan came in the door, she looked and she was like, hey, this like 3D website thing is cool, and your SEO sucks, And I was like, oh God, please help, And so, like, these are the kinds of decisions that bringing someone in that capacity really helps. It helps illuminate where our gaps are and what do we need to focus on, and how can we improve what we're doing so that we're setting ourselves up for success. And having someone with that, like, marketing and public relation and communications and SEO and search and discoverability, like that piece of the business development pie. I feel like sales is another big piece of the business development kind of pie, or that part of the puzzle. And I know we're going to need more help from someone in the future who's like really focused on business development from a sales perspective and sales process, and understanding outreach. And how does that work? Like, we're just trying to catch people who might be looking, but we're going to have to become more proactive as we grow. And making sure that we find someone who understands that and has experience and has expertise in that, and can bring that to the table to help us complete our pie. At the end of the day, a business is a puzzle, and you can't be every piece. Like, you've got to rely on your people. It's at the end of the day, businesses are made up of people. Sure, it's product, it's either a physical good or a technical product or a application or whatever, but it's the people who support the product or that make the business work or not work. And so, having a good understanding when you're starting something new that the puzzle is big and there's going to be gaps, and you just have to try to fill in as many of them as you can, as best you can, until you can bring someone in who really knows that. I would love to have an actual technical co-founder one day, and I feel like Joel is the closest thing to that right now. And we've talked about ways to potentially get him on board with Aktiga as an actual CTO and co-founder. And he's also like, but that means I'll probably have to manage people, and I don't really want to do that, And so I really appreciate that he's honest about that, and knows what he likes to be close to the metal, and he loves to write code, and that's his world, and I very much appreciate that. And I think it's really important to recognize like what people are good at and also what they want to do. Like a good coder doesn't make a good engineer, and a good engineer doesn't make a good manager, and a good manager, doesn't make a good leader unless you're getting the right pieces in place and you're supporting people in what they're good at, and so, communicating with people, and you might find a really good, engineering manager who's not really great at writing code, but they're really good at managing people. And in my mind, that's way more important. As long as they have a technical understanding and they can support the team in the way the team needs to be supported, like with some management and some process and some structure, that's the most important thing. I think one of the things that a lot of businesses fail at is promoting people into the wrong position. It's like you get someone who's really good at what they do, and then you promote them, and they're not really good at that thing that you promoted them to do. And it's like, you just lost resources, and now you're actually hampering your progress as a business because you have the wrong person in a position of leadership. I think leaders are not born, they're grown, but a lot of people have innate talent, and and they have to want that. It's my job as a founder and as a leader in a business to make sure I'm putting people in a position where they actually want to be. Because I want the people who work for Actiga to enjoy what they do. And how's someone going to enjoy what they do if they don't want to do what they're doing? It's like, if you want to be an engineer and you want to write code, okay, let's get you in there. And if you want to be a front end or a back end engineer or full stack, or you want to be reviewing code, like what's the sweet spot? Where do you want to be? And let's make sure that that's where you're putting your time and your energy, because that's what's going to support that person in being like highly productive and highly motivated because they enjoy it. And it's my job to make sure I'm setting those people up for success in that way. Like I always say, if there's stuff that's coming up and you don't enjoy, sure, there's going to be stuff that comes up that's not fun. But the vast majority of your work should be enjoyable. And if it's not, then we need to make a change. We need to look at what you're doing and what are you interested in? Like, what's your focus? What's your desire? What's your passion? Let's put you there. Because if you put people in a position where they're working on something that they're excited about or they're passionate about or they really enjoy, they're going to be exponentially more productive. I mean, that's basic. Like at the 1 Million Cups presentation, I'm talking about Deming and talking about management, talking about the concept of the willing worker and supporting people enjoy their work. This is critical. I don't understand why more people don't know about it and do it, because when you make those decisions, I see the impact. Then like people, it's like their productivity shoots through the roof. It's insane. It's like, it's my job to make sure that not only is this something that I'm giving lip service to, but it's actually something that we're putting into practice in the business.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. So with you being here in Asheville, so I was doing my pre-research for all this, and I was reading about Atiga.
Okay,
And then you get to
nice.
some place in there that talks about you want to be 1,000+ person company.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so how do we square this circle? So you want to be 1,000+ person technical company in Asheville, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how is that not a fever dream? Like how does that make an ounce of sense?
Well, ironically, through the nomads, the AVL digital nomads, I have met so many technical people in town that all work remotely for much bigger businesses. I mean, Netflix and Slack and Salesforce and Google and Apple and all of these FANG companies
Yeah.
are represented in Asheville. These people are already here. And the vast majority of them, when asked, I'm like, hey, if you could work for a local business, would you? And 100% have said yes. If they could get paid even comparable pay, it
Right.
wouldn't have to be a one-to-one dollar. It could be 75 cents on the dollar of what they're getting paid currently. They would happily take a local job. And so I think there's already 1,000 people that I would hire that live in Asheville that are technical, whether that's designers. I mean, we have this kind of glut of really creative, talented people in Asheville, graphic designers and branding designers and UI designers and product designers and a lot of creative artists in Asheville. And we've always had more of those people than we've had technical people until COVID. And now we've got this caliber of talent in Asheville that doesn't work for a local business. And that's really what my dream is if I could hire everyone who I've met in town who said they would work for a local tech business if they could, I would have 1,000 people already.
But can you make that? Because, like, I notice, like I say, when I look at your LinkedIn stream, it seems like you're always somewhere that's not here. So again, like I love Asheville. Asheville is very an optimistic place, but it's also why I hate Asheville. Everybody's like pie in the sky, and you're like, yeah, but I've got bills to pay, so I don't know about you folks. Um, but do you think, like, with client acquisition, with support services, with vendors, with all the stuff that goes into a business, like if you said you wanted to do 1,000+ person business in Raleigh, I shrug my shoulders, be like, have fun. Like nobody cares. Like I'm just wondering, like, do you think this place could actually functionally support it? Could you actually grow a bit? Because like I talk about that. So we did a fireside chat with one company owner here, and he was happy with 22 employees. Like 22, he was like, I'm fine. I know everybody's birthday, done. And that seems much more the Asheville versus 1,000 person. Is that just they're not thinking big enough? Are you thinking too big? I don't know.
That's a good question. I mean, one thing I'll never be accused of is not thinking big enough because my vision is 1,000 is just the first step, 10,000 is the second step. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it comes down to the desire of the leader. Like a business leader, an entrepreneur. If they're like, "Hey, I want to get to 25 or 50 people, and if we get there, holy shit, that'll be like a huge achievement, and I'll be happy with that." And what I feel like, the reason why I say I want 1,000 person business in Asheville is partly because one, I think we already have the people and we already have the talent, and the only thing we already kind of have the infrastructure too. The only thing we'll need is a big building, and I'm going to build a big building as well.
Okay.
Biggest building in town. That's the plan. Um, but you know, in order to grow a big tech business, you got to have a lot of people. That's one of the things. The reason why tech businesses have to raise money is because it takes so many people to make a software product scalable. You have to have teams and teams and teams and teams. You got to have 500 people to grow something, even if you're just at a Series A or Series B. You got to have 200 people to get this thing to market in the way that you need to. You need technical teams and marketing teams and sales teams and design teams, and it takes a lot of people. And when a technology business raises money, they don't raise money to spend money on anything other than people. Like 80% of their cost, their overhead, is talent. They have to go and acquire these people, and they have to offer competitive pay so that they can recruit their teams, so that they can grow and scale their product. So when we talk about big businesses and scalable technology businesses, you're not spending a lot of money on AWS. Sure, you're gonna eventually, but you're spending your money on your people who can set up your infrastructure, so you don't have to spend a lot of money on your AWS bill. Because if you set it up wrong, you're going to get that $50,000 bill unexpectedly, and it's going to break your business. So I feel like, um, if I'm thinking too big or I'm dreaming too big, I'm cool with that. And also the saying is shoot for the stars or shoot for the moon, and at least you'll land in the stars. That's my goal. I'm a pie in the sky. I'm a moonshot guy, and I'm always going to be. That's just how I'm wired. And I think part of what I see as a limiting factor in Asheville specifically is there's not enough people who are thinking big. And I think the way Asheville grows into being able to support not just 1,000 person business, but several, is to have more people who think it's possible, um, and then to work towards that goal. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. So, I think it's fun, and it's fodder for jokes at like, networking events when they're like, this guy Shane, he's crazy. He wants to grow a big tech business in town. And I'm cool with that. I don't mind being the butt of the joke because I think it's going to happen. And I think it's actually way more doable than a lot of people might expect. I think a lot of the economic development, like commission and people at the chamber and in our local municipality, they're stuck in this old mindset of tourism. It's heads and beds tax, and it's more hotels, and it's Explore Asheville. And as great as Explore Asheville is, I heard someone say recently, if Explore Asheville shut down and all of those people lost their jobs, and all of the money that they're spending on their promotional efforts stopped, the amount of tourism dollars that came into Asheville would not change. Because are they actually moving the needle? Maybe. Are there tangible metrics that they can generate that say that the money that they're spending is helping? Probably. But people come to Asheville because they come to Asheville. The Biltmore House brings people. The mountains brings people. It's a really nice place to come to. Like, that's not going to change. And part of the reason why we now have all these people who live and work remotely is because more and more people are discovering Asheville as a really awesome place to live. They're like, this is actually great. It rains. It's not too hot in the summer. There's no real risk of fire. We had like our first fire risk here since the 24 years that I've been living in the mountains. I had never seen a fire like we had recently, but that's so rare, and it's a climate resilient place. It's a really awesome spot to like raise a family and have kids and do that whole thing. And it's attracting more people because of that. And I think organizations like the AVL Digital Nomads are kind of like a great example of just how much more desirable Asheville is as a place to live, and work remotely. And my hope is to say, sure, come here and bring your job with you, and then I'll hire you. And that's kind of my goal is to give those folks that don't think that there's a job in Asheville that would pay them enough to live, to change that, to say, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You can work for a business that's growing. You don't have to be a nurse. You don't have to be a professor. You can actually work for a sustainable technology business in town, and you don't have to work remote. Now, you can work from home if you want, or you can go into the office because you work for a business that's local. I mean, that's my goal.
That's fair. And so with that growth, we're coming about to the end. So what do you think would get you there? So basically right now, if you look at, ugh, been a long day, Aktiga, you've
You're
got
good, no
your
worries.
contract development company, you got your product. So what your product right now is AgendaKeeper.
Yeah.
Do you think time and material or development company actually scales that well? Because like AgendaKeeper, I don't know whether or not it'll work, but at least a product, that a product scale once you find one that people want. So do you think the contracting work will scale very much, or are you betting on either AgendaKeeper or a product like that for your scaling?
Yeah, 100%. I think the agency model only scales so much. We could probably grow to a team of 20 or 30 or 50, and have a really solid agency with great revenue and hopefully really great clients. But 100%, Like the thing that scales and grows that requires 1,000-person team is a product. And so my vision and my goal is for that growth to come from our product development. And so my hope is AgendaKeeper is a product that lots of people want to use. I use it. I really like it. The folks that I've shared it with are using it, and they're really finding value in it. So I feel like there's potentially a niche in the market where we can really get this thing to land well, and try to grow to some benchmarks in terms of user growth and revenue growth. And if that's the product that gets us there, or if that's the product that gets us to the first next big step, and then if it's that product's growth that gets us to the next big step, or if it's another product, or if it's a product that came in from a client and they want us to help them grow it, and then that becomes something else that we're helping fuel its growth as well as like the dedicated technical team, and then we can share in their growth and their success in their business. So that's kind of the goal. But I agree. I think agencies can only scale so much. I actually know a guy who runs a technical consulting agency in town, and he's got a team of 120, but they're globally distributed and it's all remote. And so that's cool. So maybe there's enough room for Actiga to grow and target that as like our ideal like agency size. I would prefer the agency serve as a way for us to be able to grow our product. Like that's really the vision. Is we're doing the service work now to generate revenue and keep the lights on, and the long-term plan is to grow a product that really can scale.
Cool. So I told you I'd only keep you for 2 hours. We're actually down to 4 minutes. Is there any final thing you'd say to the students about any lessons you learned about running a business or being in the technical world?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is what I'm sure I've heard you and a lot of other folks that teach technology and software development and coding, that it's a constant learn in progress. Everything iterates. Take everything that you do as continuous, as an effort of continuous improvement, whether that's your skill set and your understanding of technology, or this coding language or that coding language, or understanding Python versus C# or JavaScript versus whatever. Everything is a constant work in process, constant work in progress. So it's you as a person, your skill set, your ability to grow. If you're starting a business or you're starting a product that you want to build a business around, treat it the same way. Treat it as a process of continuous improvement. Try to approach it thinking about the systems that you're building, the people that you're putting in place, knowing that it's going to continuously evolve and change over time. Change is ultimately the only constant. And so I think encouraging people to be aware of that when they're getting started is really important. Like anything you do today is going to be different tomorrow. It's going to be different in a year, 2 years, 5 years. It's going to change. It's going to have to change. That's the only way that you can keep up with what's happening in the world, is if you're changing, if you're growing as an individual, if your business is growing and changing and evolving, and whether that looks like a pivot or if it looks like a change in direction or whatever that is. Like don't be afraid to change, because that's the only way to stay alive.
Cool. Fair enough. Okay, everybody. So that was the end of this session. Shane, stay here. I'll kick them all out in a second. I will show everybody, again, when you do informational interviews or whatever, always know what the hell you want to ask, why you're actually having the conversation. And also, one thing I would tell you folks too, is if you're having an informational interview with somebody else and you're the one that's doing all the talking, you're probably not learning. So one of the things you'll notice, like with all of my guests that I bring on, is I sit here, I ask questions, and I shut the hell up, because none of us are here for my opinions. You hear enough of those. So just something to think about. So anyways, this will be posted to YouTube in a little bit. So it's good to have Shane here, and see y'all later. I'll kick you all out to the weight room or whatever, but basically the session's over. See ya.